Thank you for having me. And my cabin in the mountains is taking a very long time. I wish I had more property rights. You can all imagine that. So today we have two of the three individuals here that are supposed to join us. We're still waiting for Dr. Sam Smith. My hope is just to talk a little bit high level about what we're doing with state-endorsed digital identity. But then we would give Steve McCown, who's also a privacy commissioner in Utah, and Timothy Ruff time to speak to you directly for a few minutes. And then we would just do a panel discussion to answer questions. First, I want to say why are we doing what we're doing in the state when it comes to our approach to data governance, and this digital identity initiative. First, what I want to say is, in my role as the privacy officer, my role is to make sure when it comes to government use of data, we are doing it appropriately and representing the privacy interest of individuals. There's a balance that needs to happen of maintaining your privacy, having right transparency so you can hold government accountable, but then government is using the minimum amount of data necessary to deliver whatever government services the legislature has authorized. And so when we had paper processes, this was a much easier thing to do. But now that we've moved into the digital age, there's this nonstop push to make everything electronic, to make everything digital. And so usually what has happened is the use of data is becoming much easier, but privacy and transparency is becoming much harder. And for you, as residents and citizens of the state of Utah, at times you're getting excluded from these processes as things modernize. Especially for older residents of the state that are still using paper-based services and records, you definitely get excluded from these processes. We also know, though, for the younger generation, there's a demand for everything to be digital and electronic. So we have to design government in a way that it meets the needs of the people. Government can still function according to whatever your elected officials tell us this is what they want it to function as, but we need to do it in a secure manner, in a privacy preserving manner, and in a manner that, as much as possible, every individual controls, and it's not government or corporations that are controlling it. So as part of our vision for modernizing government, we did a heavy look at what's happening around the world when it comes to digital identity. In Europe, in Asia, in China, in other states, they have been heavily talking about digital identity. If everybody had a digital identity, wouldn't it be great? You can go and engage in government services and prove you're you and stop fraud. That sounds like a very noble cause. We can stop fraud and people impersonating what happened in Minnesota would not happen. You would not have that type of fraud or impersonation. If you had certain forms of digital identity, you could stop people online from presenting to be people, pretending to be people that they're not. In Spain, the prime minister said they want to use their digital identity to require everyone using social media to have to prove who they are and tie it to their real identity and not have anonymity. Now that sounds great. I do want to remind you, in the US, our founding fathers had to post articles and papers anonymously to even get things going for this country. So I'm using that as an example of, these are things being talked about around the world, may not align with our values in Utah or in America. You have in China, they really do scoring. They do scoring on how you use your identity, and they can use that to prevent you from getting certain services. That concept of identity being a tool that government can turn on or off, or just take it away because they don't like what you're doing, that's really scary. We saw this here in the US, in a state. There's somebody running for governor who said they don't like what the current administration's doing. So if they can identify these law enforcement officials in their city, they would just take away their driver's license. That is really scary, because right now you use driver's license for identity. So with seeing what we saw around the world and is currently happening right now, but knowing digital identity is coming, and when I say this, it is already here. In the US, if you want to file your taxes yourself on irs.gov, you have to create a digital identity that's owned by a corporate company. You agree to their terms and conditions. You log in with something called ID.me, and their terms and conditions say they can terminate your account at any time. You can't access irs.gov without that. There's something inherently wrong if you have to go through a third party to prove who you are. In the US, you have mobile driver's license. This is something coming up through the bureaucracy and the administrative state, not through elected officials, but it is being deployed. Here in Utah, Steve McCown and Timothy Ruff, they were actually one of the part of the group that led the push to eliminate tracking and surveillance from mobile driver's license. It's part of the international standard, but this is not something that's been voted on by elected officials and inherently had risks that didn't align with our values. You also now see Apple Digital ID, which is something that's based off of a passport. You can use it with your Apple device. They'll verify who you are, and then they issue this Apple Digital ID that they could still just terminate at any time. So we are really concerned about any digital ID approach that, one, is not fully controlled by the individual. We're very concerned about any digital ID approach that a private company may say you need to start paying a monthly fee to be able to prove who you are online. We're very concerned about any digital ID approach that would ever track or surveil your usage of your digital identity. And we are very concerned about any digital identity approach, whether it's corporation or government, where they can use it to influence decisions you make and impact your free agency. If you're acting within the law, you should be able to do whatever you want. So them being able to take it away because they don't like it, or they're tracking what you're doing with it and scoring it to use that to impact your behavior, that scares the heck out of us. So with that said, digital ID is coming. So the question was, do we take what the world's giving us, or do we create something that represents our values? And so we, maybe we're being a little cocky here, but we said, well, why don't we try to create something that represents Utah values, see if we can bring everyone together in Utah to support that, try to take it nationally, see if other states would support that, and let's see if we can actually export this to the world as an American form of identity instead of letting the world influence us. There's never been a time in history, other than with the current tech, where we let the world dictate our values based off of manufacturing or supply. We've always exported, so we want to get back to that with this. So last session, the legislature passed Senate Bill 260. Senate Bill 260 authorized us to spend the last year doing this research, doing this work, engaging locally. We have had dozens of town halls and meetings and events to engage the public. We have invited states to come to Utah. We held a multi-state summit in October with 12 states and most of the big associations around digital identity to, one, express our displeasure with what we're seeing, but to invite them to help create something better. We have traveled across the country to talk to big tech companies, to talk to all these groups, to talk to our federal delegations, to talk to the associations of these entities that are working on it, to let them know we want something different. And we've actually started talking to other countries as well. The State Department has reached out to us asking about what we're doing, because we're the only state talking about digital identity as a constitutional rights-based form of identity. That's an American version. And why did they reach out? It's because they're being asked by the UN and other countries, what's the US approach? And we're the only state talking about it in a way to actually strengthen democracy and protect rights. So with that said, we've created what I think is a very unique framework and strategy of how we're going to move forward. And so this session, this was just numbered, I believe, on Monday. Senate Bill 275 is the result of our last year of work. This is being sponsored by Senator Kurt Cullimore, with the floor sponsor being Representative Cutler. Co-sponsor should be added also as Representative Chevrier, who has been heavily involved in the process as well. In this bill, we do some very unique things that you probably have not seen in legislation before. At the very start of the bill, it includes a digital identity bill of rights. This sets the parameters and framework that any digital identity program has to work within. Fundamentally different than what any other state has done or any other country. We're starting with what do we think the rights are, and then those dictate how the system should function, not some other desires of what entities want, whether it's profit taking and interoperability. Those are lesser things. We have to protect rights first. And the first right I want to make clear is that every individual has unique identity that is separate from the government. You are born with your identity. The government does not give you your identity. The government's role is actually, though, to help you protect your identity and to endorse it. Just like with money, if your identity is endorsed by government, others will accept it and trust that it is you, but they're not the ones that can take it away, and they're not the ones that give it to you. So that is first and foremost what we are establishing, is that identity is yours. For some of you, that has deeper meaning based off of religious beliefs of where identity comes from. But for everyone, I think we can agree, identity is innate to you, does not come from government. And this is very important from our first principle from a democracy standpoint, is when you were born in this country, you were born and then you are a citizen because you were born here. And so, but your existence as a person existed actually before that citizenship. And then you have citizenship and you're able to vote. And from that voting, all the rest of democracy and what we have as our form of government comes from that. So we view how we approach digital identity in the future, if there's ever going to come a time, and it will likely happen, where they say, yeah, you can prove who you are digitally and they'll let you vote. You already see this session where they're going to have digital signatures for ballot initiatives or things like that. So I'm just preparing for what will the world look like 10 or 20 years from now. And if you're going to be able to digitally prove who you are and they're going to have voting associated with that, we had better have some digital identity approach where the individual controls their digital identity, and it's not something government can take away based off of how you're voting. And it's not something that a foreign adversary can hack the system and issue millions of fake identities just before an election in order to create distrust in democracy. So in the bill then, I'm not going to go through all the rights. There's two others I do want to highlight though. Parents are the guardians of their children's digital identity. I'm very concerned with what I'm seeing around government in other states getting in place between parents and their children's records and their data. So when it comes to digital identity, the parents are the guardians of their children's digital identity, and parents in the home should be making the decisions of how their children are engaging in the digital world. Our state-endorsed digital identity program is meant to help strengthen families and empower parents to be the ones that are in charge. The state is there to help provide the tools that you would never be able to create yourself, but the parents are the ones that are in charge. Next, no tracking, no surveillance. You do have Fourth Amendment protections. So if you go into that Digital Identity Bill of Rights, item number 10, it is almost word from word quoted from the US Constitution. So absent warrants and others lawful methods that have been established, no tracking, no surveillance. So you can imagine the impact this will have then. 10 years from now, this sounds like a pretty great world where it takes time to change the internet. The internet was built wrong decades ago, and it's been done wrong for 30 years, but it doesn't mean we can't change it and make it better. For us that are younger, we're going to get the benefit, but our kids and grandkids will definitely benefit from this. The other thing I just want to mention, we've all lived through the last 30 years of how digital and electronics have come about and the harms that have come from it, the goods that have come from it. But it is still really early in terms of digital. So what we're doing now, 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, well, this made absolute sense that we did it this way. And in their view, they're going to say, oh, they were still early in the process, just learning. But look at it from that perspective of if we do this now, 10 or 20 years from now, things can be a lot better. And 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, well, they made some really great choices to help make democracy stronger, as opposed to if we don't do this, the world may not look like what we want 100 years from now. So with that said, in the bill, there's a couple other parts I want to highlight. The program does get authorized to allow us to move forward and start creating the program within the constraints of the Digital Identity Bill of Rights, and then also explicit requirements that are included that the program must implement related to security, related to privacy, related to guardianship. These are just the practical aspects of here's what it must look like. This bill does a couple other very unique things. It establishes the rules of the road for anyone that you present a digital identity to. So here's some examples. Your digital identity, you're likely going to store this in a digital wallet. We all use cell phones, we use iPhones, we use Apple devices, Google devices. You're going to have some digital credential that you can store on a device, And in this process, to get your digital credential, you've come to the state, just like with the driver's license, you've proved you are you, and we prove that you control this device and this unique wallet identifier that only you know and control. And then you will receive the state-endorsed digital identity credential that you can present to prove that you are you. And there'll be different attributes that are on that. So name, address, phone number, things that you need to engage in everyday life and transactions. Now, when you present these things, others will accept them. These people you're presenting them to, in our bill, we call them a verifier or a relying party. A verifier is like the technical component. Online, you need to say, hey, I want to access this website. And maybe it's a site where you have to prove that you're of a certain age. These are laws that are coming about. So you could present your digital credential, you could scan it, double click it, and it can say, yeah, I am over the age of 13. And it doesn't need to present anything else, but you've met that requirement. The verifier does the digital aspect of it. It doesn't call home to the state to check it. You can prove it yourself with your credential that's been signed by the state, but there's no phone home tracking. And then whatever data is necessary goes to this relying party, this company that you're trying to engage with. And so you're going to control this credential on your device. And all of these other entities you're engaging with, this bill establishes the rules of the road. They have a duty of loyalty to you in this bill. This is very unique. They have to operate in your best interest, and they now have a fiduciary responsibility. This is a total about face of how current privacy works on the internet. Currently, every company wants as much data as they can get, and they exploit it for maximum value to get maximum profit. And what we're saying is, in the free market, they're supposed to compete on price and having the best product that you're choosing, not on knowing enough about you that they can use algorithms to try to influence you to buy their product. So in this new world, 10 years from now, when you engage on the internet and you provide data, you're going to know that they're bound to operate in your best interest. And they have to collect the minimum data necessary, keep it the shortest time necessary, do the least amount with it. So these are constraints and rules that the market has not seen thus far. We also, in the bill, break down for all these key parties. So the wallet where you may store this identity, there's very specific rules for them of how they must function. For these verifiers and these relying parties, there are very specific rules for them of how they must function. If they operate outside of those rules, and not just them, the government entity itself, if they operate outside of the rules, there is enforcement power. So there is direct enforcement from the Attorney General in relation to anybody violating these requirements. In addition, with that duty of loyalty aspect that's in there, any individual could bring forth their own action and say, you have violated my duty of loyalty. In the bill, we have also given every individual a pathway to make complaints. If they think any of these parties have violated their privacy rights that are outlined in that Digital Identity Bill of Rights, or they have violated one of their duties, not met the requirements, you can submit complaints directly to the Privacy Ombudsman, which is a person that's employed in my office, and they can review and mediate complaints, and they can refer them directly to the Attorney General for enforcement. And that is SB 275 and why we're doing it. So
it would seem that there's a service, so how is the service?
Yep. So there on SB 275 is a minimum funding request submitted on the fiscal note for the bill to get it started. But then digital identity, our view is everybody has a right to paper. You're not forced ever to have a digital identity. We know many will want it. So if you choose to receive the state-endorsed digital identity, just like with a driver's license, you would come to the state, you just prove that you are you, and then you would pay a fee to have it issued. There's no ongoing cost or anything like that, but it'd be for those who choose to have it. You just pay whatever that fee ends up being. And then you're free to use it out in the market.
And how is that money used? By individuals? Program work?
Yeah, that's used to cover the program cost. The private sector, there's a ton of value for them to accept it. They'll have to cover their own costs to have the infrastructure to accept it, but there's many reasons they want to accept it. So for example, with AI, it is so easy to create deep fakes and fake driver's license, fake records, pretend to be other people. So they want to be able to accept it because they will know you're actually you and it's not somebody pretending to be you. Companies like Apple and Google, they want to support it and have it in the wallets because it makes their product better, because you now have this high assurance, identity credential that you can go and use out in the market. And so it makes it more likely you're going to use their products too. So the fees will cover the state cost. The private sector, they'll figure out their cost model, but there's tons of incentive for them to accept it and use it. Yes.
So regarding the money to implement it, I'm looking at the bill. It says there's no money appropriated in the bill. So where's the money?
Did you go to the fiscal note section in the bill?
I was trying to find it.
Yeah, there should be fiscal note published. Fiscal notes went in at like 10 o'clock yesterday. So there was funding, an RFA request, so a request for appropriation included to the Government Appropriations Committee that they voted to prioritize yesterday for SEDI. It was also included in the governor's budget. This has been a priority of Governor Cox as he works through what this approach will look like. And then we did work to get a fiscal note in there too, which is essentially combining all the fiscal asks into one fiscal note. But if the bill is in committee today at 2 o'clock, so the fiscal note should be published if it's in committee today. And usually if you go to the bill page, you'll be on the right side and you'll see the fiscal note tab. I can help you look for it after if you need. The fiscal note is just one-time funding to get the program going, and then it should be able to sustain based off of fees from individuals who actually want one. So it's not a general thing the public pays for if you're never going to use it. It's not ongoing from taxes. It would be those who want it can use it. I do want to give some time. I'm going to give some time to Steve McCown and then Timothy Ruff, give you each 5 minutes to talk about your roles in the process. This has been I will tell you, dozens of people to work on this public policy. I am not the brainchild behind it. I'm lucky enough to speak on behalf of dozens of stakeholders. Most of what I say is the results of literally the knowledge and input from all these people to make a comprehensive policy that government doesn't usually come out with at the state level. But Steve McCown, Timothy Ruff, and Sam Smith's not here yet, but they have been 3 of the most influential people in this process representing other groups.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for all that you do. We really appreciate that. My name is Steve McCown, and I am a chief architect for a company called Anonymy Labs, based here in Utah, and we build privacy protection tools. I'm also a commissioner appointed to the Utah Privacy Commission, and our charter is specifically tasked to look at laws, regulations, programs, and the like, and their impact to personal privacy. Part of what, just by way of my background, part of what I add to this process is I started in computer security back in 1993, building security systems for the U.S. Air Force. And over time, I ended up at the Department of Energy, where I was actually trained as a computer hacker specializing in cell phone attacks and protections and the like. After that, it started to look to me like, I used to observe people, they'd take a BlackBerry and then they'd take a cell phone and they'd get in these meetings and your status was how many devices you could put on the table, right? And I would look at this and I thought, someday that cell phone and that BlackBerry are going to get married and they're going to have this new device. And that's what we have now. We have this device that's not just for communication, it's for internet, it's for pictures, it's for everything. And in 2009, I started a company to do mobile payments on the cell phone. And we ran a pilot at BYU, Idaho, where we allowed students to take their phone and tap on payment terminals in the college bookstore in order to buy things. Now, as part of my research, I looked at how do you break cell phones? And that's kind of often what I bring to the table is that counter position where everybody says, this is going to work really good. And I say, well, let's talk about that. And So we've gone a lot of rounds. We have a lot of expertise that went into this bill before it was even a bill. And we bring expertise collectively from the cryptographic security side, from human factors side, from even data compromise, so that we can build the best system here in Utah that protects privacy while enabling all these fun uses that we want to do, to tap your phone to get on the airplane, to pay for things at a garage sale. This is what we've wanted as a society, but it needs to be safe. You need to be protected. You need to be protected against financial theft, from identity theft, from any kind of manipulation. And that's what collectively all these groups of varying expertise have put together, is changing the way Utah does things. And even it's having some global impact as well. As Chris mentioned, Timothy Ruff and I and a few others, we looked at the mobile driver's license specification that you have right now, or that you can have to put your driver's license on your phone. And to make a long story short, we uncovered some ways that government could watch where you go and what you do and keep a list of that. And we pushed back. And this was a global pushback, that we got the organization doing mobile driver's licenses here in the United States to change their recommendations and implementation policies to avoid that, whereas that was already happening. And so there's been a lot of concern about protecting privacy, and there's this tension between cell phones exist and we kind of want to use them with things, but can we still be secure and protected in the process? And that's kind of the balancing act that's come together through discussions over the last several years. And I feel very privileged to be a part of this process, so that we can have a good, solid digital identity here in Utah, but then also make that available for other states to protect their citizens as well. And it's been really neat to see how well that's received. And I have associates that are involved with the digital driver's license in California that are looking at what we're doing, and they're very threatened and excited because we have a different paradigm, right? But they're looking at it because they see the benefit to the citizen, which is what their goals really are anyway. And what we've put together here in the state is a much improved, much better set of technologies and procedures. So we're excited for the legislature to vote on this bill, and any support that you can lend, we greatly appreciate it. And thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
My mind tends to go to worst case scenarios, whether
Okay.
it's individual or whether it's the whole group of everybody. What happens when you lose your phone, you leave it at home, it gets broken, and so you don't have that? I mean, do you lose your identity? Is there some way to get it back? Can you have a backup of a physical thing that you can use? And then what if there's an EMP and everything goes out?
So, one time I was in a meeting with a very high level leader over at DHS. And she said that was her nightmare, was that somebody detonate a nuke a couple hundred miles above the United States, and that electromagnetic pulse takes out all of our devices that we rely on all the time. And that's a real concern. And I don't stay up at night worrying about that too much, because I know there are people that do. But as Chris mentioned, what this bill in particular advocates is personal choice. I tend to look at that as, I'm going to use my cell phone all the time because it's highly convenient, but if I can always fall back to my plastic card that I have today, then in such an event, you're protected. As far as, we get people that ask us about, what happens when I'm out fishing and I drop my phone, now it's down at the bottom of the lake, get a scuba diver. No. There are ways to back up the data content, without going into too much technical detail, there's ways to sort or bifurcate that data across family members that can help you restore it. There's a whole variety of solutions that will allow you to recover your identity when and if you lose your phone. Even a more probable case is when you upgrade, when you get a new phone. How do you go from the old phone to the new phone? There's a whole series of processes in there for re-requesting and reissuing credentials so that we protect the keying material, the cryptographic material that backs this identity system. So those are being discussed at length with people with some tension on one perspective or another. And what I see happening is the cream rising to the top. And that's why our system that Utah is about to pass into law is so much better than a lot of the other digital identity systems out there, because we've taken the time to hash this out and ask questions like you did and come up with some very good answers. You should see some white papers and articles and things come out addressing those specific topics as well.
Well, I also was listening in on a committee that was talking about home title fraud.
Yes.
And we were saying the only way that they could really protect this is if we had a digital identity. And I'm going, well, I surely want to have my house protected,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not too sure that I want to use this digital identity all the time. So can you do half and half?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, home title fraud, theft is a huge emerging problem, because what's happened, and as a former hacker for the Department of Energy, so white hat, that resonates with me. Looking at these processes and finding loopholes that you can twist and manipulate them. That's what they've done, is they've found that this paper process in that case can be manipulated through a variety of things. And all of a sudden, the home you just spent 30 years paying for now belongs to someone else, unless you go to court and unravel all of this. What the digital identity will do is help make that a couple of things: cryptographically verifiable. So if someone tries to assert that they own your home, but the cryptography doesn't match, then you can prove that no, in fact, they don't. The other thing that it does, and this is actually kind of neat, is in the SEDI, not so much in the legislation, but in the technical document they put together, it talks about kind of receipts for transactions that come to you, not to the state, but to you. So that when you go to McDonald's and you buy something, you get a little note, say, hey, I spent $10.95 at McDonald's, right? But when you sell your home or buy your home or any of that, there should be a similar type of cryptographic receipt so that you can prove you did or did not take that transaction. So putting that under cryptographic control is going to have a lot of benefits. That's not in the bill specifically right now. What this is doing is getting the identity and the system processes laid out. But that's one of the things I expect industry to come up with and say, hey, that thing we just built, now we're going to apply it and solve this problem. So, yes, and then I think I should give Timothy some time. So go ahead.
It appears that it may be a playground for identity.
Mm-hmm.
What has been done then to protect digital identity?
So, excellent question. Digital identity and identity theft in general is a huge industry. The internet, when it was created, if you think back to way back when, it was all free, and then companies decided, well, we don't want to pay for free, so let's put advertising. And then advertising got better by tracking people, manipulating it. So we've migrated through this whole process, and now we end up with the problem that you highlight. What this will do is it will tie your cryptographic identity, your SEDI, to your specific device. And other than going through a whole series of processes, you will keep it on that device. And it'll be able to tell that transactions happened with the keys that you possess on that device and not keys that might have been stolen or put onto another device. And so that will be detectable. And so this notion of identity theft gets solved, in this case, through a series of, technology and process steps. But that was one of the big concerns that we had, because some of the other methods of digital identity, it's easy to kind of copy files from this phone to that phone, but that's not what's happening here. Among other things, your phone has what's called a secure enclave, kind of like a data vault, if you will, that's part of the hardware provided by Apple or Google. And so the SEDI will tie into that. And so that's why, and I say it'll be linked to your device that you possess. That's where I'm going with that. And then on top of that, your passphrase, your biometrics, your Face ID, your fingerprint will be used to access that. So there's a whole series of things that enable the security of the city. Yes, two more, and then I'll pass the baton.
Initially, who's the custodian?
Yeah, so the question is, when the state puts together a system and issues credentials that feels very centralized, how is that going to not be the honeypot for attack?
Yeah, my answer to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the bill, this has actually been a really interesting discussion. We had to sit down with Catherine Austin Fitz. I don't know if any of you know her. Very interesting discussion of her experience. So one of the, we got a list of requirements. Like, what would any approach need if it's going this way? So first, identity, we do not have a national identity. It should be at the state level. And so nobody disagrees with that. This is a state role, no nationalized ID. At the same time, any digital identity system, because we have two different things happening here, you're going to have a credential that you control on your phone, but you do come to the state and prove I am me, so you can get that credential, because you don't want anybody else to be able to come and try to pretend to be you. So there's a set process, which is, I think, what you're hitting on. What's happening to that data that's used to prove you are you, that needs to be held by the state so they can say, yes, this is who was issued that identity. So is that the system? Was it you that asked the question?
Yeah.
So is it that central system you're asking the question about?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you're speaking on.
Yep. So in that process, when you come to prove you are you, there are national standards on this, so some federal law when it comes to how do you endorse and issue credentials. So there is data that has to be maintained that you came, proved you're you, it was verified, here's what you presented, birth certificate and things like that. Not all of that data will be retained, but some of it does have to be retained because federal regulations require it. So that is like a system of record. It's this core system that you don't want to have compromised, but you don't want that data being shared out either and things being done with it. So with that system, the law, these are some of the requirements from Catherine Austin Fitz. One, it has to be located in a state-owned data center and state-controlled data center. The reason for this is when you have these systems controlled by third parties or vendors and a warrant is issued to get data, guess who doesn't receive that warrant? The state doesn't. It goes to the vendor or third party. And if they control the encryption keys, then they'll just release the data and the state has no idea that it's being released. So that was one of the biggest requirements to ensure that whether it's some law enforcement warrant or a FISA warrant, that the state is the one that's receiving the warrant and they have the obligation to act in your best interest and it's not going to a third party. Then you also will see in the bill requirements that the only way for that data to be able to be shared is with a warrant. It is not for anything else. Right now, for other identity, there's other identity laws and requirements out there that they authorize data sharing in lots of situations. That is not in this bill. It is only in the event of a warrant. In Utah, we do have state-controlled data centers in the state that are SOC 2 compliant and meet the highest security requirements, and they're authorized to store tax information, IRS data. So we are capable of actually storing it in that facility. The program itself, this program, and there's a dedicated program director that the bill creates, this is meant to be their only program. So there is no conflict of interest of them having other services they have to provide. That was also something that came up in conversation with Catherine Alston Fitz of you have to eliminate, you have to have proper separation of duties and any conflicting interests. So their duty of loyalty is to you to make sure every individual can have their identity. And then if something were to go wrong, there's processes to make sure you can reclaim that identity and nobody can impersonate you. So from that strong security, state-controlled data center, and a singular program that this is their only program and the only way data can ever be accessed is with a warrant, this is more robust than any other program I'm aware of in a state to be able to do something like this. I do want, is it okay if we have Timothy come up first and then we do some additional?
I just had a
Yes.
follow-up to that warrant comment. If somebody does present a warrant for your information, is there any obligation that you be informed that it's being released? Because if somebody wants my information that I'm supposed to be in control of, they should know that it's being given to somebody.
Yeah, so there's two parts there. You have your credential. The state can't release your credential. Like they'd have to come to you and it's on a secure device that's encrypted. And so like if it's on an Apple device, even they don't have the encryption keys to turn it over. I can't speak for everyone else. So that's why lots of entities, they hate Apple devices because they can't just unlock them themselves. The state, I'm not aware of any state or federal processes where if an entity is in possession of the data and they get a warrant, they notify the individual. Me personally, I'm not against that. I'm very pro-individual control, but I'd anticipate we'd have to delve in some really deep legal analysis of what would the implications be of that. Sometimes warrants, I'd imagine there'll be scenarios where they say you explicitly cannot, depending on of what the investigation is. But I love that discussion, and we should delve deeper on that of how would we implement that into this type of policy.
Through the current fingerprint use and facial recognition data are vulnerable to exploitation.
Yeah, so we've had this discussion. I'll let you delve in deeper on this, but our view at the state is biometrics alone are not supposed to be they're not a proper form of authentication, identification or authentication, because they eventually will get turned into digital data and then it can be reproduced. So that's why our approach is it's cryptographic keys that they cannot be reproduced. And if they are, the system can detect compromise and rotate to a new key, and nobody can impersonate you with a previous one. So that's getting really technical. Anybody who's actually, if you're very technical, we'd love to delve into like that key management discussion. But we presented this 2 weeks in DC. It was very eye-opening when like the US Secret Service had a cybercrime and financial crime comes up, and NIST is coming up, and they're all wanting to talk about this UTOL approach because how we're doing it around who controls the keys and key management. It's very transformational. All right, Timothy, do you want to come up?
Well, it's coming up just real quick on the biometric question. There's two types of biometrics. When you use your face or your fingerprint and you upload it to a website, that's one use case. The other more common use case that you're seeing a lot is you use your Face ID or your fingerprint to log into your phone. That's kept local. So the real risks with biometrics come when they get centralized into a remote location, but don't be afraid to use those on your phone because those are kept on your device. And so from a hacking perspective, it changes the footprint from a single central server complex to 300 million randomly mobile devices around the United States. So from a hacker perspective, it dramatically changes it. So use them on your phone, not in the cloud.
Is it safe to use your fingerprint? Nobody can grab that and reuse it?
I would use it on your phone. Yeah, I would do that. Are there cases? Well, you're talking to a former hacker, so we can talk later. But generally speaking, I think it's very reasonable for the average person to use biometrics on their phone because they stay there, not the ones that go off to the cloud on other systems.
When you use it as your phone, you're actually using it as a second factor. You know about multi-factor authentication. It's a second factor. You don't want to use it alone. But the vendor at the other end It stays local on your phone. But let's have a technical conversation.
Could you use the microphone?
Sure. Quick show of hands, who wishes Utah was not doing anything with digital identity whatsoever? I'm serious. Whose instinct is, I hate the whole idea of digital identity, I wish it would just go away, and I would rather not see Utah do a blessed thing. Okay, and so the default position should be, I think, for liberty-loving people, is to be absolutely, against digital ID. I think that should be the default position, and the bar should be pretty high for someone to persuade you that we should actually move forward to do something. My name is Timothy Ruff. I live in Bluffdale, grew up in Mapleton. I grew up in the shadow of a famous liberty fighter, Howard Ruff. Some of you may remember him. And he would speak and write a lot about, freedom and free markets and things. And I grew up just hearing all about how bad big government is and how we want small government and freedom and loving America and very patriotic. And I grew up with that instilled from a very young age. I found myself in the digital identity space starting in 2012, and I helped create a movement called Self-Sovereign Digital ID, or Self-Sovereign ID, shortened often as SSI. And I helped find other smart technical people. I'm a little bit of a technologist, but I'm not actually a programmer, but I'm really good at finding other smart people and working with them. And we invented some of the very first pioneering ways that you could have something called self-sovereign digital ID. And what self-sovereign digital ID is, it's the idea that you actually own and control your own digital ID, not subject to anyone else. That's the basic idea. Because right now, we all have a whole lot of logins, right? We have logins, we have email addresses, we have all these things that actually do not belong to us. Now, we think we're the only one who knows the password, but guess what? If the password we put in doesn't match what they already have in their system, they can't let you in. It's what's called a shared secret. Can you think of any more clear oxymoron than a shared secret? But that's literally what it is. It's a password, and they've already got it. And when you put it in, they want to see if it matches what they've already got, then they let you into the thing, right? So even the password really isn't yours. The username is often your email address, which someone else has and can take away, for the most part. There are exceptions to these things. But the point is, the self-sovereign identity movement had the ideal of you being able to finally have a digital identity of your own that wasn't given to you by someone else, couldn't be taken away by someone else. So that is my background. That is my push, my dream, is to make it so that we can exist in this digital realm in a way that is not subject to the control of others. Now, why is it so important? Because I believe if we lose the battle in the digital realm, it will affect the physical one more and more and more. It's a generational thing. This generation in this room probably we're not digital natives, right? This is going on like 30 years that we've been living in the digital world. And so we're digital adoptees. But the next generation, and now the generation after that, are digital natives. And if you poll them, they believe in Bitcoin more than gold. And they're not afraid of digital ID. And they are increasingly outnumbering our generation as we die off. So there is an inevitability here of the incursion of digital things into our world. And I want to talk to you about a tectonic shift I've seen in digital identity in the 13 years I've been in the space. Digital identity has been dominated by private industry, by Google, by Facebook, by Amazon, by large American technology companies, for the most part, American companies. But remember, you don't have your own, So where are you getting it? You haven't been able to get identity, digital identity from government. You got it from private industry. So, and their interest in spying on us in what's called surveillance capitalism is they want to sell us stuff. They want to track where you're going. They want to track what sites you're visiting, what you bought, because they want to put ads in front of you. They want it to be more relevant, is the way that they whitewash the surveillance. They call it, oh, it's relevant. We're just giving you ads and things we already know you're interested in because we're tracking everything you do. We know what you like. So here you go. Here's an ad, right? It's relevant. Okay, it's surveillance. But it's capitalism. They want to sell you stuff. Here's the tectonic shift. Government, always slow to adopt new tech and new things, is now getting into the digital ID game all over the world. All over the world. Some big new things in Australia recently. There's a big thing called the EU identity wallet in the European Union. China is had their social credit going for almost a decade now. And they're introducing a digital identity system, even more invasive on top of that, using social credit, where they actually score everything that you do. They've got tens of millions of cameras. They watch everything you do. They know everywhere you go. They know everything you buy, and you are scored for everything. It's totally dystopian. So all of these countries around the world are getting into the digital identity game. And there's one nasty thing they have in common that is a big threat to freedom everywhere, and is a big threat to Utah if we don't do something soon. That thing they have in common, we call phone home. And what that means is when you present your digital identity, in order for it to be verified, the entity you presented it to has to phone back home to the place where you got it. Now, what this means is, if you go to the liquor store to buy some liquor, the liquor store is literally phoning back home to the government and saying, hey, Timothy's at the liquor store. He's presented this ID, at least he says he's Timothy. Can you please tell us if this is really Timothy? That phone home enables pervasive tracking and surveillance. Now the government can see everywhere you go and use that digital ID. Now it gets worse, because the digital ID you get from government is far more powerful than your Gmail address. Anyone can get a Gmail address. It used to say, oh, anyone who can fog a mirror, but a whole bunch of digital agents now can go get email addresses super fast, and they can't fog a mirror. So like the bar is just going so low, it's ridiculously low to get a Gmail address. It doesn't mean you really are anybody just because you had a Gmail address. So guess what? People are increasingly using their government issued digital ID in place of a Gmail address to log in to things. And so guess what? As you increasingly use your government digital ID, not just for official things, but for everyday life, to log in, because it's easier, it's stronger, faster, there's better, these credentials are powerful. It really strongly proves you're not only Timothy Ruff, you're a human. And it's important to differentiate that you're a human these days. So what's happening is these stars are aligning in a really nasty way, where people where government's getting into the digital identity business, issuing credentials that are better and more powerful and easier to use than the ones that we use from private industry. And with phone home, now if you use this credential in a bunch of places in your life, now government can track everything you're doing everywhere in the digital realm. And what scares me about this is the incentive, the motivation for government is very different than private industry. It's not surveillance capitalism. What interest might government possibly have in tracking people? That's the only interest. Control. Yeah. They're not trying to make a buck. Private industry wants to make a buck. Government doesn't have that interest. They may want to tax you more, but it's really control. And I'll just give you one example. Just last week in Kansas, license plate reader system there was used to aid the government in tracking down a guy. I can't remember what his infraction was, but they literally used the license plate reader data to go track this person and arrest him for something. Okay, so they were connecting surveillance tools to find someone. I need to remember what the infraction was. It is a loss of freedom that we will never regain. Once government can see everywhere you're doing something, they will never relinquish that power. Because they'll do it, I mean, the villain in every sci-fi movie, right? They take over the galaxy. Why? For your safety, for your protection. It's restore peace to the galaxy. The reason they have to see and do everything and surveil everything is for your protection, right? That's what all the villains say. And that is the argument that's used in the EU and everywhere else to defend phone home tracking surveillance, is they need to catch the bad guys. They can't catch the bad guys if they're not watching absolutely everything you do. So that's the scary part. Now I have some good news. The scary part, the world's getting into digital ID and it all phones home. The good news is there's been a breakthrough in digital ID about 5 years ago. There's some other breakthroughs, but the best one happened about 5 years ago, that enable digital ID to be verifiable without a phone home. There's two things required to surveil. You need to know the identity of the entity doing the check. It might be the liquor store. You need to know it's the liquor store. And then you need to know the identity of the person that's being checked, Timothy. Once you know those two things, Timothy in the liquor store, if the surveiller knows those two things, it was Timothy, liquor store, they can now track. Because now it's Timothy at the cigarette store, or it's Timothy at the scene of the crime, or whatever it is. I need to know those two things. If you break either one, you break surveillance. If you don't know it's Timothy, you just know someone went to the liquor store, you're not tracking Timothy. If you just know that Timothy did something, but you don't know where, you're not really tracking Timothy. You just know Timothy did something, but you don't know what. SEDI, SEDI, State-Endorsed Digital Identity, is the acronym for this program that's being created in Utah. It not only breaks the first, it breaks the second, it breaks both. The state has no technical means of knowing which entity is doing the verifying and which person is being verified. It breaks both. It's a really important innovation in digital identity. And I'll close on this one point of urgency. The reason those of you who raised your hand at my initial question and opposed the idea of digital identity, the reason you need to get behind Senate Bill 275, SEDI, is because if we do not show the world how to do digital identity in a privacy and liberty respecting manner, we will end up with something bad. We may be able to hold it off for a few years, but the pressure to interoperate with the rest of the world's identity systems that all phone home is immense. So what we have to do is we have to export liberty. We have to show the world how it can be done in a privacy and liberty respecting manner, and lead out and say there's a new way, there's an alternative. You don't have to phone home. We can do this in a privacy respecting manner. So this is why I believe that even if you hate digital identity and you raise your hand, hold your nose and support something that actually respects liberty and privacy. Something where Utah can show the world how it's done. So thank you. Question? Yeah.
Because the next worst step is embedded chips.
Mark of the beast, embedded chips.
Absolutely. I mean, they'll have all the information anyway, like for it with phones or whatever. And that does seem to be.
Yeah, it's feasible. Yeah.
So you currently fully endorse the current
1,000%. Yes, because of the breakthrough in the technology that enables digital identity to be verifiable without a phone home, And because of the urgency, don't forget the urgency. If we don't show the world how to do it right, we will get something bad in Utah. If not this year, we already had something bad. It was turned off thanks to Chris's team. We had a phone home system operating in Utah. And once we exposed it, it was turned off. And now we got to put something out there positive or we'll get something bad. Yeah.
Google and Apple.
Great question. How do you untangle this from Google and Apple and the private industry? They aren't involved. It is not tangled in the beginning. So
they can't track themselves.
it's not dependent on them. I won't say they are irrelevant because we want them to accelerate adoption of a good thing, and they are in a position to accelerate adoption. But even if Apple and Google never lift a finger or do anything, there's nothing they can do to stop what Utah is doing with SEDI. They can't, well, if you use it in your device, if you have an Apple device and you're using it and you go to the liquor store, Apple knows you're at the liquor store. Google knows you're at the liquor store. So, and they know it's you. So they know the two things. So they can track you. But my point is they're not tracking you through the SEDI system. It's not your digital identity that enabled the tracking. It's other things. It's the fact that you have a Google device and you're running Google hardware or Apple hardware, and they know other ways. So they can still track you, but not through the digital identity system. That's really important.
All right, make just one comment on that. A lot of what we've done in Utah, our success the last 5 years with privacy is we plant seeds, and it takes time for good public policy to go. So like Utah is the only state with comprehensive government data privacy law. A lot of people don't know that. So SEDI is one of those seeds. There are thousands of data points happening, but with SEDI, that we know how big digital identity will be in 2 years. So you get this one right, and then it starts breaking all those other things. So in the bill, it has requirements for like anti-correlation. They're not allowed to use SEDI to track everything you're doing between everywhere that you're presenting it. In the wallet, it is specific. Google or Apple, if you have a SEDI in their wallet, they're not allowed to track what you're doing with your SEDI and present it and do things with it. So SEDI, we're viewing as one of those seeds that you got to plant. We're undoing 30 years of how tracking, surveillance, and the private sector market was functioning. But there are lots of other ways they can track. That's how the internet currently works. We're just introducing something that is meant to allow us to have a tool to then build upon to change how the current market functions.
Sam's not here. So is there anything that Sam, you tell them who Sam is, and that you guys are gonna have to cover now because he's not here?
I think we can sum up what Sam would say, I think actually in two things. One, this is a conversation of facts. And so Sam has created a very specific protocol that he is willing to bring forth and let anybody challenge to say, this is how this will function. It's an open standard, open protocol. There is no secret here. So anybody in here should be able to sit down and look at the standard and protocol to understand this is how my identity will function. And if you disagree with that protocol, if that ends up being what we built SEDI upon, then sit down and have the discussion. There's a lot of people that are saying, well, no, here's the protocol you should use. Or here's, why I disagree with it. This is a conversation of facts. There is not FUD. There's not conspiracy here. Sit down and have the conversation. And Sam's willing to have that. Any of us are. But we need to sit down and have the hard discussions. We've already admitted lots of things can go wrong, but we've done the work to be able to discuss the facts. And you're not going to trust SEDI because of public policy. You're going to trust it because the technology actually functions the way we say it can. And any American, this is kind of the future transparency, you should be able to read the standard, you should be able to read the protocol, and you know how it functions. And if anybody does something outside of that, enforcement can be held against them to get them back in line, and damages or whatever was done to you, you are made whole. And so Sam would love to have those technical discussions with anybody. Sam Smith, Dr. Sam Smith, he is the creator of the key event receipt infrastructure. That's the carry protocol that we've been looking at that does all the wonderful things that Timothy mentioned. And Timothy and Sam have been business partners for years in the space, a very long time. And at the very beginning, when we started this journey with Steve McCown as well, helped to create the SEDI concept based off of some of the capabilities in this protocol.
Remind us what SEDI means.
State-endorsed digital identity. The name is important
Yes.
because the state's only role is to endorse it, nothing else. So, yep.
Does this include everybody from 0 age to whatever?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the bill is they're going to make everyone have it, no matter the age. I'm completely kidding. It's totally optional. No one has to have it. As a matter of fact, in the legislation, it says that there can't be any advantage to having it over having paper. So that's kind of a separate point to your question about children. But let's talk about people that are age 0, babies.
Can you do this?
Yeah.
I have a child, 41, but he is not.
Yeah, disabled.
A responsible adult.
A dependent, yeah.
And how easily he can be enticed, not understand. There's almost a lot of those people in Utah. But go ahead, if it's applicable.
It totally is. Is your 41-year-old child able to use a digital device?
To some extent.
Okay, so let's pretend for a second that he's capable of using a device and accessing websites. Just okay, but some are.
Yes.
The point is there's a digital guardianship capability with SEDI. It's the first that's ever existed in any digital identity system that I've ever seen, and it enables dependents, whether they're children, elderly, disabled, any dependent person who has a guardian, right, to be able to use digital identity subject to the authority of their guardian. So they can do things with the limits set by the guardian. Never been possible before. So digital, and it's really important because why do we have 16-year-olds are the only ones that get identity? Between your birth certificate and age 16, there's this big gap. And yet there's a lot of 13-year-olds who have mobile devices who are going all over the place and they don't have any kind of digital. So we need a way for 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, all of those that have not reached the age of emancipation, which is 18, right? All unemancipated minors need the ability to have digital identity that can operate subject to the authority of their guardian. That is something that SEDI introduces. I'm very excited about that set of capabilities. It's very inclusive that way. Inclusivity is an interesting, sometimes controversial word, but in this case, it's really, really good word. Yeah.
I understand how state is Utah, but how is this going to be universal? How will they?
Go ahead, Chris.
We are in the process of forming a multi-state consortium. So if you remember, I mentioned we invited states to come to Utah in October. We had 12 states that came. And what we have found is there's been a lack of leadership on this topic. This is very complex, and the bureaucracy, the administration of states don't know how to discuss it. So that's part of what we have actually taken the challenge on to say, here's the comprehensive framework. And now we are forming a consortium with other states to essentially walk through how this will function. And as we allocate resources and we build out the technology, our plan is to make it openly available for every state. And it does mean we have to do the heavier lift. I can tell you my team has been working way more than government employees should work. This is our passion project. We love privacy, and the concept of giving people control sounds weird in government, but that's what we want to do. But we're doing the work to bring these states together. We are attending every event, every conference, and states are receptive. The federal government is receptive. And our solution, what we're putting out there, it's hitting all the right policy notes to create a safe space for this to happen. So our duty is to bring the states together, make this a true comprehensive national policy that states can adopt, and then scale it. So we're in for a few years of very hard work, but it's either we do it or we're stuck with the status quo, which isn't good. So we're going to do it. And we need everybody, though. That's our big push of why we're going out and having these meetings, because everybody's fighting about this in every state, and all the talk show hosts are talking about it. But if we can get everyone behind one approach, we can change things. That's why in Utah, our strategy always was, and we said this in committee last year, we have to get everyone in Utah on the same page, because if we can show other states that you can do this and you can have the discussions, it's not based off conspiracy, but it's facts, and it's government how it normally doesn't function, but it's doing it for the people, other state leadership will take note because they're not used to seeing that, and they will follow.
And then Apple and Google follow too.
Apple and Google companies are reaching out. They are very actively engaged in discussions, and they are looking at it of how do we build this into our product timeline. Even in Utah, I will tell you, in the legislation, there's two key things in there. I think these are the most important things. It says every healthcare provider in Utah, and so you ask, how are we going to get this to scale? Every healthcare provider in Utah, if you get over 10 million in public funds, you have to accept SEDI. If you're accepting any other form of digital identity, you also have to accept SEDI. And our whole point of that is we also want you not just to control your identity. I eventually want you to have full copies of all of your medical records and everything else you need to engage. So that's why Representative Chevrier is so supportive, because once we give you control of identity, you can prove who you're you. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to control everything else. We also have in the bill that every governmental entity, if you accept any form of digital identity, you also have to accept SEDI. So whether you're engaging at the state or local or other level, they will have to accept this when you engage in government processes. But that's going to do two things. It allows you to seamlessly engage. You don't need to have 20 different logins and accounts. You can have one that you control. But then also these entities, if you've been following the public policy, that everyone nationwide is struggling with cybersecurity. And the biggest cause of cyber breaches is actually credential compromise, usernames and passwords being compromised. So with our approach, you'll control this digital identity that you can use to then access and authenticate into systems in the future. And that is going to save all of your governmental entities a huge amount of resources, huge amount of time, huge amount of money, but make government more seamless. So that's part of then also how we scale it, is we're creating actual use cases for it. Yes.
Now, if somebody moved to another state, I mean, after this is all settled, do you re-register in that state like you would re-register to vote?
Now you're getting into the practical, how does this get implemented? How do you have reciprocity between states? That's the multi-state consortium. But what is then the public policy when people move states? Right now, when you move states with a driver's license, federal law requires that your driver's license be revoked and that you get a new credential. This is why mobile driver's license is actually a really bad thing to use to log into Netflix. Because if you log in with a Utah and then it has to be revoked, and now you want to log in with one from Iowa, how do they know it's the same exact person? SEDI is unique because the state's giving you a credential, but you control your unique identifier that only you create. And even if you don't have a SEDI anymore from our state, you could still log in and be associated with your different accounts over your entire life to engage in services. So you may need to move to another state, and maybe there needs to be a new endorsement. We actually don't know yet on that part of the public policy. That's why we're bringing the consortium of states together. So this would be either discussions with executive governor's offices. Some states have secretary of state, but that's a complex discussion. We're also having that discussion at the federal level of what will this look like. So we're having the discussion. We don't know the answer, but you will, at the very base level, have something you control over your life, but that state-endorsed credential associated with it is to be determined.
Could I follow up just on that real quick? So, sorry. I don't always like microphone, but there's two parts to what Chris just said, and I wanted to underscore that. So there's the identity component, SEDI, which is the state endorsing your identity, right? They don't make it, they're just endorsing it. What he didn't say was, that is your driver's license. So we've gotten the habit of using your driver's license as your identity because it's unique, it comes from a trusted source, and so forth. But by separating, this is an industry technical term, it might be politically charged, and I don't mean it that way, but there are entitlements that you can receive on top of your
Call it privilege.
a privilege.
That's a nice.
So there, you have a driving privilege. Your driving privilege is not the same as your identity. And that's what SEDI does, is it decouples those. So you might have a privilege from the state saying you can drive a car, you can hunt, you can fish, you can do whatever privilege you've received from the state. But that's why they can't take away your identity. So when we go to another state, when somebody moves from here to go to another state, they don't necessarily, I don't know about policy, it might be a policy issue, but they don't necessarily need to lose their SEDI from an identity perspective, while they will probably lose those privileges from a state resident perspective. And so by decoupling those things, it actually becomes a lot safer and a lot more flexible.
This bill passes, how do you present it to citizens? How are you going to educate
Go ahead.
the masses?
So I would say there's generational approaches. Kids are going to pick up on this really easy. I will tell you, like the crypto community, they love this approach. In crypto, it's whoever holds the keys holds the crypto. So that's why if you lose your key, you can never access your crypto again. So they understand the concept. But those who have never been in these spaces, it has to be absolutely simple how the technology functions, and it has to be almost automatic. So we've actually been meeting regularly with the big app companies that if you have a device, you're likely that's going to be the wallet you choose. So Apple, how would they make this absolutely simple to use and automatic? How would Google or Samsung or whatever digital wallet you choose or gets created? It's open standards, open protocol. So maybe another entity you trust creates one. It's going to be up to them to help make this super simple and automate the process. You're always going to have those power users that are super technical and they want to get in, customize, and do their own cool thing. That's not the general public. So our answer is, from a technical side, that user experience is critical, and we need to work with these companies to help develop it. And what are those standards so it's usable and accessible by everybody? We want to account for individuals that have disabilities, that may have hearing or visual impairments. If you're a child, if you're an adult, these are things we have to take into account. But then at the same time, the education piece. How do we educate the public on this when they receive this, to know how to use it, to know how to protect themselves? So it does have in the law that we're required to do that. And that's part of what this bill will have us build out while this program is being defined. A lot of what we do is very collaborative. So I would actually imagine we'd use Gail and others and we'd say, hey, let's bring in groups to design, what does this look like? How do we educate the public on this? We do have a privacy commission that will be very involved, but we're going to need your help. Obviously, we're very technical. So how do we communicate something the world's never done? We need the public to help us know if we're doing a good job.
I have an idea. Quick show of hands. How many of you have ever used a digital wallet? Okay. The basic idea of digital wallet, very similar to a physical wallet. You get something into it and you hold it in your wallet, and then later at some point you present it out of your wallet to do a thing. Okay? That is how this works foundationally. There are some things where you want to be advanced and protect your keys in creative ways and backup devices and synchronize. There's other advanced things. But the core answer to your question is it works like a wallet ceremony. I call it a ceremony. They call that the most common password in digital identity. The most common ceremony is forgot password. There's a ceremony where, okay, forgot it again. I know how to go through the ceremony to still get in, and there's a ceremony that we're all accustomed to when we forgot our password. So there's the ceremony of using a wallet. It is a ceremony. It's I need to receive something from Delta Airlines because I bought a ticket. Now I hold it and I carry it, and then at the right place, I present it. That's a ceremony. And as long as people can get their head wrapped around that ceremony, it's going to work.
So do you do away with cash?
No, now you're talking about payment. We're not dealing with payment.
Catherine Austin Fitts requirement, digital identity cannot be associated with central bank digital currency. Utah already has a CBDC law on the books. I know they've been strengthening it. Scares the bejesus out of me. That's another form of control. So I would view this as, we know on identity, we have a lot of influence on public policy. So we're making sure that's in your control. CBDC is a very different policy topic. They will not be connected, but you obviously know the concern.
So what's our next step? What do you want us to do? How can we support this? How can we?
Join the Borg. You know what the Borg is, right? The collective. No, it's there's a lot of fun jokes you can make about this, but the funny thing is that guess who doesn't joke about the Borg? The Borg. You can only joke about the collectivist approach to identity if you actually are thinking about an alternative to it, right? And so I think the next step is just to support. There's going to be a ton of naysayers. Remember, when I started talking today, the default position should be extreme skepticism of anything digital ID. So the default for every rational person should be, heck no. And so if you've been persuaded by what you've heard today, and you will hold your nose and vote for a digital identity bill because of the strategic importance of introducing a better way to do digital identity, because we'll get something bad if we don't do something good. If you're persuaded by that argument, spread the word, get support for the bill, and that's what I think the next step is, right?
Because if we don't plan our lives, someone will do it for us.
Yep.
And that's what I see the value of this is. I don't know anything better. We'll just be ruled over by those who have a louder voice.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you right now, there is not a lot of strategy at play from the public or elected officials. What is coming up is just what happens when there is not somebody demanding or the public saying, here's what we want. So I would say, at the very least, I think everybody in this room would support every word that's in the Digital Identity Bill of Rights in the bill, which everybody would likely be behind. I would say most of you would support almost all the content that's in the bill if you go through and read it. But we've got to get the public demanding that you want what's in that Digital Identity Bill of Rights, and that should guide every aspect of public policy on that. And if we do that, then we can elevate the discussion to get more and more people talking about it and actually change the direction things are going. And I told Gail I was going to say what I'm about to say, because I knew people were going to say, how do we get involved? That's the most common question we get. And you get involved by letting your legislature know what you want or what you don't want. So today at 2:00 is when Senate Bill 275 is being heard. And the best time to let them know what you want or don't want is in those hearings. So if there's an issue you care about and it's worth your time, we're driving up there. There's going to be a lot of other people up there. Come up and make your comments and say what you do or don't want in regards to digital identity. Obviously, there'll be more hearings coming when it goes to the House side. But I will say on this bill, some other entities we've talked to. National ACLU. I know we all don't agree on everything, but they sure love privacy and they don't like surveillance. This is the only approach that they've said. They said Utah's approach, this is word for word in their paper, there is only one state doing digital identity right, and that's actually Utah. And it's not because of what we're doing at the technical level, it's because we're the only state actually having a deliberate public policy discussion. Nobody else is going out and doing town halls. Nobody else is doing comprehensive legislation. Nobody else is working with other states through consortiums and bringing everyone together to make it happen. So it's a public policy decision for elected officials that you've voted for that should be making the decision, not something coming through the bureaucracy. And SEDI is a result of it going through a public policy process, not just something some private sector associations want. So I think we have a cross-aboard group or level of support here that nothing else had. So get involved. Come up if you can to committee today. Come to the next one. Attend our events and just help spread the word that you want something better. You don't have to say you support SEDI, but you want what SEDI is espousing, and we've got to change the discussion.
What time is the hearing?
The hearing is at 2 p.m. It's in the Senate Government Operations and Political Subdivisions Committee. Yeah, you can text your senators and tell them like, hey, this is what we want. And you tell them too, like, hey, we don't want these other things. If there's things you don't want, let them know that. If you don't like surveillance, you don't want tracking, you don't want certain things, tell them those things as well. This bill did pass unanimously last year, what got this all started. So it does have cross the board support, but it's important now that in Utah, I think we're gonna be able to get it. But what you do here, that's where it helps other states get in the conversation. What Gail's doing to help spread this message to where we can get it to other stakeholders, that's what we need to do to change the national conversation. And make your demands of what you want as the people so that policymakers start listening.
You should also be able to participate online. Or you should just go to le.utah. You'll find that committees and you can participate online. Even if you can't make a comment, they track how many people are online and how many are actually. It makes a difference that way.
le.utah.
Yes.
Okay.
Utah spelled out.
I'm going to give you a quote. Last year's committee on SB 260, the final word said in the committee, this was the closing remarks for last year's bill. A vote for that bill, they said, was a vote for freedom. I'm not going to say this bill is necessarily as good as that. I think it is pretty good, but it's a unique bill of what we're trying to do. We are intentionally trying to disrupt things government usually doesn't disrupt, and the world could use a little disruption on this topic.
So, say that those passes, is this something that now is about
It's going to take time to deploy the technology. We do have contractors working right now to create the actual initial proof of concept system that we're building to do security testing and analysis on. We're contracting with vendors to then put out public transparency reports of hey, here's the facts of the testing of the system. We actually have to do the administrative rule. So we've built into this some controls that you normally don't see in government. I have a healthy distrust of government. You can probably hear it how I talk. It's weird, I'm in the executive branch, but it's great. This system, before it can even go live, has to go through public comment period so that the public can engage. And it's a longer duration. Public comment's usually 30 days. This is 45 days. So we've got to create administrative rule with more details of the program. The public has to be engaged, and the technology actually has to be created and deployed. So I would say we are at least a year out from when the bill passes to when somebody could first go through the process to receive a state-endorsed digital identity. And our initial use case, who are we trying to get this to first, is important as well. So right now, a lot of states are doing the age assurance laws to protect kids online, to ensure they're only able to engage on sites that parents allow or talk to people that are also their age. So we are looking at what are then the first use cases where we can empower parents to be the guardian of their children's digital identity to start protecting kids online. But with that said, we would at the same time make it available for everyone else. We would do proactive engagement on it. My hope would be these same groups that we're talking to now, we will come out and we will do lots of presentations, lots of discussions to educate the community. We also present at all the county association meetings, League of Cities and Towns meetings. We're going to make sure all the elected entities or officials are aware, and all the entities that need to be able to accept it, work with them. So my hope would be with that across the board, there's just lots of communication happening. And then you would have a set process where you'd know from all of them, if you go here, here's how you can obtain it, here's how you learn to use it, and then here's where you can actually use it.
what do you
That's still being determined. From a policy perspective, we do think it's fair that only people that choose to receive one would pay a fee, not the general public just pays for it for everyone. Currently, a driver's license fee, I think, is at $35, and that covers like the proofing process and paperwork and system. So I think you'd be looking in that same range for the fee. But I mean, the benefit far outweigh that of like being able to prove you're you for like property transactions, and nobody else can, steal a land record deed from under you. $35 is well worth it. So I think we'll end up with a pretty reasonable fee, but it's also going to be based off of demand. Like if very few people wanted it, a higher fee. But I anticipate the fees will be able to be driven down. We are looking at also grant funding. There's lots of resources out there to help build this out, because at the federal level, they're really struggling with fraud, like when it comes to like SNAP and TANF benefits. So this also provides a benefit, because if anybody was to apply for services and they had a SEDI, that's a high assurance identity, very low likelihood that it's fraudulent. So the cost savings for America, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars a year just in taxpayer funds saved that you can then use to solve real problems and not spend it on fraud. So we're looking at all opportunities to fund it.